To some of you. Welcome to this webinar organized by the World Youth Congress on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. My name is Zumrat Erkin. I'm the Program and Advocacy Manager here at the World Youth Congress, and I will be moderating today's first panel, which welcomes community leaders from East Turkestan, Tibet, Southern Mongolia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Chinese Democrats as well. Before we start, I'd like to go over some housekeeping rules. This webinar will be recorded and live streamed on YouTube. If you wish to stay anonymous, you can also turn off your video and change your name. There will be a Q&A period at the end, so participants are encouraged to use the chat to submit their questions, which I will be reading to our speakers. And I would also ask our speakers to limit their opening remarks to 2 minutes so that we have enough time at the end to answer some of the questions from the audience. So once again, welcome to this webinar. Today is the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, which is a celebratory day for the Chinese government, but for all of us here, this is a dark day, which reminds us of a century of oppression. And this is why we have named our webinar Chinese Communist Party 100, nothing to celebrate a century of oppression. So you will be hearing from all the community leaders who are living under this oppression since a century. So we are pleased to welcome all of the participants today. So I will start then by giving the floor to our president, Dolkun Isa, for his opening remarks. Dolkun, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zumratai. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to see here familiar faces. I want to thank everyone for joining us today at this important event. On the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. During this webinar, Uyghurs, Tibet, Hong Kongers, Southern Mongolians, Taiwanese, and Chinese Democrats activists coming together to commemorate our centuries of oppression, and we will discuss how China human rights records has evolved over the past decades and how the international community policy response has developed to address this. We all have common goal. We want to all fundamental freedoms guaranteed. We want democracy. Together we can achieve this goal because there is nothing more powerful than a group of committed people working together to achieve social justice. CCP fears citizen power and participation. And I would like to use this opportunity to extend my warmest congratulations once again to Mr. Pempa Sereng as a new Sikyong President of Central Tibet Administration. And I also like to congratulate my longtime good friend Lobsang Sangay, who had been great leader of Tibetan people. He has contributed immensely to Tibetan and the human rights cause. It is a critical time for all of us today. Today, CCP is committing genocide against Uyghur, Kazakh, and other in East Turkestan. It is aggressively sustains the assimilation policy in Tibet and the Southern Mongolia, undermines democracy in Hong Kong, and threatens Taiwanese national sovereignty. At the same time, CCP threatens global democracy, human rights, and international human rights system. Events like this are so important for fostering dialogue and understanding between our community. What once was oppression and violation has turned into the intentionally strategy by the Chinese government to undermine and erode everything about our unique identity. We are now enduring an attack on the very core of our being. At the same time, Chinese government is also trying to isolate our community from the rest of the world and have better control over them. They separate us from our loved ones. They cannot go on, we cannot go in. Even basic communication has been cut off. In this context, we don't have luxury of sitting idly for a while. Our cultures and our existence as unique peoples are under attack. We must embrace under similarities and come together to speak with one's voice. China has tried to keep us divided by exploiting difference in the region, culture, and the language. But China's repression has made our collective future intertwined. The fates of Turkestan, Tibet, Southern Mongolia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan may very well be determined in the near future. This is the time for all of us to speak as loudly as we can and demand the international community to take action. Our fight for justice and freedom is a long one, so we must be prepared to work together in the good and the hard time. So thank you, and I look forward to fruitful discussion, and thanks once again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Isa, for these opening remarks. Now I would like to give the floor to our Sikyong Pempatsering, who was sworn in as the Sikyong of the Central Tibetan Administration and the Tibetan people officially on May 27 of this year. So once again, congratulations. And so I would welcome you to give your opening remarks.
Thank you so much. It's really my pleasure to be part of this webinar organized by the World Uyghur Congress, led by President Dolkun Isa. I have personally had a long association with the World Uyghur Congress during Rabia Kadir's time. We have met many times and we represented our respective communities on different platforms. And I also take this opportunity to extend our greetings and best wishes to all our Uyghur brothers and sisters. And today on this panel, you have our friends from inside China. Teng Bao is also here. We also have, I think, quite a number of other representations from representing Chinese people from inside China who are now outside because of what you have said, a century of oppression and repression. And we also have our friends from Hong Kong who are undergoing tremendous hardship in the last 1-2 years, several years, and our friends from Mongolia, from Southern Mongolia and Taiwan. So this is one of the formats that we have been following over the years, but we have not really devised strategies as to how we can really work together with a common ground. This is something I think we need to take it up in our next meetings whenever that is possible. And once the pandemic ebbs, I really look forward to meeting all of you personally. I think we'll have to look at different issues from different perspectives and see where we can find common ground for all of us to work together to face the common opponent. As you have rightly titled this webinar, CPC 100, Nothing to Celebrate, a Century of Oppression. You celebrate only when the people whom you rule are happy and they enjoy the basic freedoms, at least the fundamental freedoms that other people around the world enjoy. But unfortunately, our opponent is China, who does not really care about the aspiration or the wishes of the people whom they rule. So the whole idea of governance and the whole idea of ruling somebody else is to make sure that the people you rule are happy. But unfortunately, this is a totally different situation with the Chinese leadership. So I won't go into details about the assimilation programs of the Chinese government with Tibet or Uyghur or Mongolia and other aspects of destroying the identity of the minority nationalities within China. And but one of our representatives is here, Secretary of the Department of Information and International Relations. I think he will get a little more time to cover those topics. And I understand that you have a problem with also time. The time allocated for Dolkun and me were 5 minutes for both of us. So it's only 2.5 minutes for each of us. So I will yield the floor back to the moderator to make sure that all others get enough time to speak. And I really look forward to meeting all of you personally when the pandemic is over. Dolkun, I think we haven't had too many opportunities to discuss and talk, so we can take this forward. And our new friends from Hong Kong also, I think there are many things that we can share and discuss and strategize and see how we can work together. So thank you so very much for giving me this opportunity to present the Tibet case. And I really hope that, because you have a whole range of panelists in the first session, and also in the second session, you have honorable members of parliament from different countries. So I really hope that they will also make our case strong and see how we can work together with our international partners. I think we'll have to put in a lot of energy to work with many other like-minded countries to push our issue forward. Thank you so much for this time. And I wish you all the success in this webinar. And then we will be more involved in our follow-up work. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sekyong. It's a pleasure to have you among us today, and you're welcome to stay as well for the rest of the discussion. So I would now then give the floor to Ilshat Kukbera, who is the Director of China Affairs at the World Review Congress. He is also the former president of the Uyghur American Association in the US. So the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all friends around the world. Today, yes, the Chinese Communist is celebrating their 100 years in a fanfare in Tiananmen Square. But we all know 32 years ago in this Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government killed innocent students. And that Tiananmen Square was become a bloodbath. And since 49, it occupied East Turkestan and then 50 Tibet, and they keep killing. And today, it's already become a genocide and it become against the humanity. And this oppression, this massacre, this genocide now is happening in Hong Kong streets. And we all witnessing this evil groups killing, arresting, forced in disappearance, whatever we can think is similar to the Second World War before the Nazi and the fascist. And they have come from the same root. One is the race is supreme for Nazi, and the country and the class is supreme for the communist. We come together, only we come together, we can defeat this evil and liberate our land, our people, so we can live a free life. That's depend on all of us, Uyghur, Kazakh, Tibetan, Mongolian, Hong Kongers, Taiwanese, Chinese, all of us. And we need to wake up call to the world. You cannot do business with an evil. You do business with evil, you are part of the evil. There is no less evil or benign evil. Evil is evil. So we need to defeat it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kukbera. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kalma Choying, who is the Secretary of the Department of Information and International Relations of the Central Tibetan Administration.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We cannot see you though.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, Tashidelek, all of you. my friends from Uyghur, from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Southern Mongolia, and also from, I guess, from mainland China, who are now settled in different parts of world. So it is my honor to be part of this virtual cross-moment solidarity discussion being organized by the Uyghur World Congress in light of the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China. And the title for today's discussion is aptly put as "Nothing to Celebrate, a Century of Operation." The Communist Party of China, or the Government of People's Republic of China, is celebrating the 100th founding anniversary of Communist Party of China with much fanfare and a sense of achievement. However, the fact of the matter is that there is hardly anything to celebrate for anyone, including the common Chinese people. In contrast to the official Chinese government claim of achievement and prosperity, the last 100 years has been a century of disaster and man-made suffering for China. It wrought havoc in the lives of its people, especially the minority nationalities such as Tibetans, Uyghur, the Mongolians that China has forcefully occupied. Since coming into power in 1949, the Communist Party of China under Mao launched a series of disastrous campaigns such as the Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution. The Great Leap Forward triggered a massive famine in China, and the Cultural Revolution set off a spree of irreparable destruction to Chinese cultural institutions and knowledge centers. The madness and destruction caused by these two campaigns in China is unparalleled in the history of mankind. Following the death of Mao and the culmination of Cultural Revolution, Deng Xiaoping ushered economic liberalization in China. Despite its rapid economic growth, China continued to remain one-party state where everything is controlled by the Communist Party. And this was evidenced by the brutal murder of hundreds of Chinese students who have marched on the Tiananmen Square in Beijing in June 4 to demand democratic reforms. The situation in China's occupied territories such as Tibet and East Turkestan have hardly improved since occupation. China has continued to implement failed policies in this area that does not reflect genuine aspirations of the people. After decades of living under such atrocity and repression, there rose a mild hope of political reform when Xi Jinping ascended to the post of president in 2013. However, since coming to power, Xi has also only strengthened his hold on his power and amplified repressive policies implemented in Tibet. He has reinvigorated China's official efforts to criticize non-Han cultures and language as part of his China dream. The latest version of China's nation-building project. As a result, the efforts to criticize non-Han nationalities have accelerated under Xi Jinping. In East Turkestan, for instance, millions of Uyghurs have been detained in self-styled internment camps in campaign to de-radicalize them. Despite global condemnation and satellite footage of such camps, China has denied the existence of such camps and have instead claimed that they are providing free education and vocational training to Uyghurs. Their Uyghur identity is also treated as a threat to the national sovereignty. Similarly, the Tibetan language and culture has also come under intense pressure to criticize under President Xi. In the last Tibet Work Forum held in 2020, Xi Jinping called for reinvigorating efforts to criticize Tibetan Buddhism. China has also enhanced its efforts to interfere in the age-old Tibetan reincarnation system, ostensibly to manipulate the next incarnation of the Dalai Lama. In an effort to weaken the influence of Tibetan spiritual leaders, China has also constantly vilified His Holiness Dalai Lama and other spiritual leaders. It has forced Tibetans to put up pictures of His Holiness of Chinese Communist leader in their homes and personal spaces. In schools and workplaces, use of Mandarin has been strictly enforced as part of China's new language policy. As you all know, at least 155 Tibetans have set themselves on fire in protest against repressive policies of Chinese government in Tibet. As the Communist Party of China marks its 100th founding anniversary on 1st July this year, China has now become an economic and military superpower. Due to its economic heft, the world has become heavily dependent on it. However, in comparison to its strength and size, it seems to be lacking the genuine trust and confidence of the international community. Rampant human rights violations, rising aggressive nationalism, what is called as Wolf warrior diplomacy, assertiveness vis-a-vis territorial disputes, crackdowns on non-governmental organizations, censorship of domestic and international media, and political repression remains a lot of tension between China and its relationship with the rest of the world. Being one of the most populous nations with a foundation of rich cultural civilization, and now one of the foremost economic superpower of the world, the Chinese leadership needs to seriously revisit its hardline and unrealistic posture and be a responsible leader of the world. Thank you very much. This is all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ching. I would like to now give the floor to Mr. Ingebatu Turuchog, who is the director of the Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center. And I would also like to remind our speakers to try to keep their opening remarks short, as we have still a discussion that we will have later on. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today is the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the Chinese Communist Party. During these 100 years, the CCP has grown from a small, obscure group to a world's largest terrorist organization that not only occupied and colonized once independent nations of Southern Mongolia, Tibet, and East Turkestan, but also have oppressed its own citizens. What does this 100-year mean to the occupied nations of Southern Mongolia, Tibet, and East Turkestan? It is a 100-year of genocide, ethnic cleansing, political repression, economic exploitation, cultural eradication, and environmental destruction. It is a 100-year of broken promises, lies, and bloodshed. To the people of China proper, it is a 100-year of oppression, a 100-year of violation of human rights, deprivation of civil liberty and human dignity. Millions of Mongolians, Tibetans, and Uyghurs have lost their lives as a result of a series of genocide and ethnic cleansing. Many millions have been imprisoned or tortured for just being who they are. Their language, culture, tradition, and national identities are systematically erased. Their ancestral territories are flooded with the Chinese colonizers and their lands irreversibly destroyed. 100 years later today, the CCP not only is committing genocide, physical genocide in East Turkestan, cultural genocide in Southern Mongolia and Tibet, destroying democracy in Hong Kong, but also is threatening the very foundation of democracy and human rights in the free and democratic world, including the United States. It is the time for us, all of us, including the people from the occupied nations and free world, to stand up together to counter the CCP, an unprecedented challenge mankind has ever seen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tomshok. I would now welcome Jenny Wong, who is the director of Keep Taiwan Free, for her opening remarks.
Distinguished friends and allies, Dakeho. I'm Jenny Wang from the Keep Taiwan Free movement. Thank you so much, Dolken Isa, Sumrite Arkin, and the entire team at the World Uyghur Congress for organizing this very timely and important event. I am deeply humbled to share this virtual stage with my fellow panelists here today. As we all know, today marks the 100th anniversary of the CCP, and that's 100 years too many. Indeed, there is nothing to celebrate as the party continues their relentless campaign of aggression both within and outside its own borders. The Keep Taiwan Free movement, which is a multi-generational grassroots movement based here in New York City, started about 2 decades ago by the Taiwanese American community here. Our main goals are to spread awareness about Taiwan's unfair exclusion from the global community and to safeguard human rights and democracy against the CCP's authoritarianism. It is important to note that the democratic country of Taiwan has never been ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. Yet day in and day out, the CCP constantly claims that Taiwan is a breakaway province, a nuisance, a problem that must be solved. The CCP has used its false narratives and has chosen mere political games and geopolitical manipulation to try to erase Taiwan's very existence. And it has used military might to try to shake us with fear. For decades, the CCP has weaponized its far-reaching influence to silence corporations, Hollywood, academic institutions, and businesses to force them to actively and willingly aid Beijing's efforts. The CCP is using these very same tactics to coerce others to remain complicit to the egregious human rights abuses they are committing in East Turkestan, Southern Mongolia, Tibet, Hong Kong, and China proper. Similar to how the CCP has their own tactics, we too must have our own tactics to push back. It is ever more crucial for us all to stand together against the CCP and Beijing's oppressive regime. I look forward to this panel to learn from each of you and to discuss how we can further strengthen our movements. And most importantly, we must not see yet another 100 years of the CCP. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I would now welcome Joey Siu, who sits as advisor to the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, also called IPAC, and who's also national coordinator at Hong Kong Watch. Joey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sumate, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, thank you, World Week of Congress, for putting together this very, very important event with so many amazing human rights defenders. And also thank you so much for your outstanding efforts throughout the journey of defending human rights of the people in East Turkestan, and also with the other allies under oppression of the Chinese Communist Party. So today marks not just the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the Chinese Communist Party, but then also the 24th anniversary of Hong Kong's hangover from the British government to the Chinese government, as well as the first anniversary of the establishment of the national security law in Hong Kong. And throughout the 1 year, or actually throughout the 24 years of Hong Kong under the ruling and governance of the Chinese Communist Party, what we have seen is that the freedom and also democracy in Hong Kong has been continuously deteriorating. And in the past year, after the implementation of the national security legislation, we have seen so many arrests of pro-democracy leaders in Hong Kong, including activists, politicians, legal professionals, or even journalists or teachers from all across the political spectrum. And not only that, we are also seeing that the Chinese Communist Party is continuously exercising the law, manipulating the legislation to continuously oppress and also conduct their political persecution against any dissidents in Hong Kong. A week ago, they have forced the closure of Hong Kong's one and only largest mainstream pro-democracy media, Apple Daily. And not only they have forced the closure of Hong Kong's media outlets, they have also arrested journalists and also other writers whose only job and also responsibility was to report the truth and to document the history of Hong Kong. We have seen that in the past year, with the implementation of the national security law, with the continuous crackdown from the Chinese Party, Hong Kong's situation is in a very, very worse situation. We have seen that all these basic human rights that Hong Kong people are supposed to enjoy as a human being, all these press freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom to assembly, are all stripped off by Chinese Party. And while the crackdown in Hong Kong continues, we are also seeing that our friends in East Turkestan, our Uyghur friends, are continuously suffering from the ongoing genocide. We are also seeing our Tibetan people not being able to return to the homeland, which is occupied by the Chinese Communist Party. We are also seeing the fact that our friends in Taiwan are being denied to the access to vaccines, which are the very, very basic rights to health and also the freedom to health. And all of these are committed by an ongoing party who has been continuously glorifying their economic growth. But what we have to bear in mind is that the economic growth of the Chinese Communist Party right now are all built on top of the oppression of the people in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, and in so many other places. All of the economic growth of the Chinese Communist Party are built on top of the social justices and also oppression of its own people in China. And I believe, as Jenny have mentioned, these 100 years has been too long for all these people under oppression. And today we come together at different, as the representatives of different communities who are also under oppression of the Chinese Communist Party. And I believe it is more important now than ever that we have to come together, become a one united, stronger voice in standing up against the Chinese Communist Party, and also to raise awareness in the international community to alert the world of how aggressive, how brutal the Chinese Communist Party can be. So as Jenny again have mentioned, that 100 years has been too long, and we cannot allow another 100 years to go on. So I'm very much looking forward to our discussion today, and also to our next steps together as the communities under oppression, to see what we can be done together to stand up against the Chinese Communist Party and to stop its very aggressive expansion towards our international community and the free world. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Joey, for your opening remarks. And then to our last speaker today is Tan Biao, who is a Chinese human rights lawyer and activist, and also the director of China Against Death Penalty. He's also Professor Posen at the University of Chicago. He has taught in many universities in the US and in China, including Harvard Law School, Princeton Institute for Advanced Study, Hunter College, and many others. So Tan Biao, welcome.
Thank you very much. For the past 100 years, the crimes against humanity committed by the Chinese Communist Party are countless and horrendous, and I call it blood debt. The killing of landowners and dissidents, the Cultural Revolution, Tiananmen Massacre, the persecution of Falun Gong, and one-child policy, and the cultural genocide, concentration camps, and killings in Tibet, East Turkestan, and Southern Mongolia. So it's not it's an exaggeration to say that the blood debt the Communist Party owes to the people in China is more extensive than other dictatorial regimes since the Third Reich. In my opinion, this is a huge barrier to China's democratic change. And the longer the CCP remains, the more crimes it will commit, and the more people will suffer, and the more difficult it will be for the Communist Party to believe that they will be forgiven by the people. And the longer the CCP's rule lasts, the more distrust and the hatred it will create, and the more unlikely the Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Southern Mongolians are willing to remain in China. And so the CCP has clearly and strongly refused to go towards a liberal democracy. And since Xi Jinping came to power, the Chinese government has cruelly restricted the space for civil society and tightened control over through the traditional moist methods, as well as most modern technology. So I call it an unprecedented high technology totalitarianism. And under this kind of a high-level technology totalitarian system, the resistance in China has become extremely difficult. And then this requires more support from international community, requires more solidarity from Tibetans, Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Mongolians, and Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Chinese. And the current situation is extremely frustrating, but our cause for human rights and freedom will prevail. We have reasons to be kind of optimistic because the wind, the international wind is changing. More and more countries are awakening and willing to stand up to the brutal and aggressive Chinese regime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tan Biao. Once again, thank you everyone for your opening remarks. I will now start with some of the questions. This will be an open debate and open question, so feel free to answer if you feel comfortable. So we talked about, a lot about looking back the past century and all of the, oppression, the brutality that all over communities have faced and are still facing today. So, looking back at the 100 years under CCP, repression was always present, whether, it's the occupation of lands, the Cultural Revolution to Tiananmen Square massacre. How do you think that the repression that we face, that our communities face today, is different from the previous years? And is there any lessons to be learned, or in terms of advocacy, have we learned anything? Any shift? Did any shift happen? So I would open the floor for any of our speakers to answer.
Let me start with one of my experience. I'm probably the one had some experience with Cultural Revolution. I remember a little bit. And when I start to remember something, the most impressed one thing is my grandpa. He was an imam in our village local mosque. And one night when I wake up midnight, I found out my grandpa was eating something, and then they locked the door from inside and put comforter close to the window, everything. And when I wake up, ask them what's going on. And they ask me to be quiet. This is Ramadan. We can't fast because of the communist government. And then I know first time what is the Ramadan with that fear, with whole the family. And then I know my grandpa was doing a carpenter work in his mosque until the so-called reform. And then now my two sisters was in concentration camp, and my mother, another one sister, I don't know if they are alive or whereabouts. And also my nieces, other cousins, everyone always get lost. This is the celebration Chinese communists celebrating. It is all is a lie. And in regard to this lie, even the Chinese communists so-called 1st July, the date of its birth is a lie. It's built upon a lie from the beginning, and to convince the people on their lie, they keep killing, massacring, genociding, and this is their bloodiest history of 100 years. We need to expose these lies with our own experience, with our story, what we had, and convince the world. And unfortunately, the world is, even though majority, I believe they wake up, but still have some fortune chasing CEOs, some corrupted politicians. They still try to do some business with them. And by doing this business, they become part of the evil. Like in my opening speech, what I said. And we need to expose this. And we need to do more after this virus. And this virus also came from this irresponsible, evil communist government. Whatever it is from, if it's from leaked from the lab or from the, if this government have a little bit responsibility, it has a little bit openness, the world wouldn't be in today's situation. We're all locked inside our homes. Mentally, physically, everyone is suffering. So we need to emphasize this irresponsibility, this lies, expose it to the world, to let the people know from our experience, from what we suffered, and from this massacre, genocide, to remind the world, if you are compromised, and eventually you will be in a doomsday. It will be worse than the Second World War. We need to remind the world. I guess this is what we should do, and to promote and push forward with all of our voice in different content, because we have this experience. I believe Hong Konger is suffering now. The world is watching it, and Taiwan is under constant threat. And Tibetan, Mongolians, and the Chinese is every day living in a hell. We need to expose this, to do more and come together. Thank you.
Yeah, I think storytelling and keeping, keep pushing for the truth and telling our stories is a really powerful advocacy strategy that I think is essential to, in advancing each of our movements. Joey, you had your hands raised.
Yeah, so I would say one of the very significant differences that we are facing today is that while the ongoing genocide continues back in our homelands, while the crackdown on freedom and democracy continues back in our homeland, and while the occupation of our homeland goes on, we are also seeing that the Chinese Communist Party is continuously extending their long arms of infiltration, intimidation, and also threatening to every corner of the globe, including every corner of our free world countries. And what we see is that, these issues have existed in the past, but then obviously we see that with China's escalating and accumulating wealth and also resources, we are seeing that these kind of infiltrations and also intimidations across the globe is getting more and more serious. And today, through its red capital, the Chinese Communist Party managed to infiltrate and to take control over so many different multinational enterprises across the globe. They were able to hold very important positions in different multinational enterprises and also different international organizations. Not only that, they are also trying to infiltrate into different communities within our own neighborhoods, within different sectors of our society. So what we dissidents in exile, or the people outside of China and also outside of Hong Kong and outside of homeland, are facing right now is that even if we are on a piece of free land, even if we are in the United States, in Canada, or in other places, we're still facing a continuous intimidation and also threat from the Chinese Communist Party. And I felt like with such a serious infiltration and also intimidation, it is really important that not only we, the people from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, from East Turkestan, Tibet, and Southern Mongolia, should unite together to counter this kind of infiltration and intimidation. It is also very important that we would be able to come together and then raise awareness in different societies in the free world, that we would be able to alert the people living in these free countries to be aware of this kind of infiltration and intimidation going on, because it is a very important thing that we need their support and we need their involvement to also help to counter this kind of very aggressive expansion coming from the Chinese Communist Party. So as Elsha have mentioned, that it's so important that we continue our advocacy by storytelling, because I will always believe that by sharing our first-hand experience, by sharing our experiences of as an individual who lived under the oppression of the Chinese Communist Party, it would be very effective in building up solidarity among different communities, not only within ourselves, but then also within the different communities in the free world countries.
Yeah, I think you've touched a really important point where I think there's a misconception where, our communities who are the exile communities, people, when we tell our stories, they are surprised to hear that we are still facing the direct consequences. For example, for Hong Kongers who are in exile, they are still, threatened by the Chinese Communist Party. And this is the case for all of our communities. Uyghurs, for example, those who have family members who are detained, or even, someone who doesn't necessarily have close family relatives in East Turkestan, but who who is vocal about it, the Chinese Communist Party will find a way to silence them in any way or form possible. And I think this is important for us to tell the world how sneaky the CCP can be and how they're infiltrating all our international systems, for example, at the UN, and even just governments through institutions like the Confucius Institute, which is, viewed or at least sold as cultural institute, but really sometimes they are censoring some of the information and what they're teaching the children and in these institutes. So I think it's a really important conversation to push, and I think we are seeing more initiatives about I think the danger and the threat of Chinese interference, for example, in our international systems. Kang Biao?
Yeah, one difference between the current suppression and Mao Zedong era is that in Mao era, China was very poor and kind of isolated, but now China is the second largest economy and very powerful, and many Western countries are appeasing the Chinese Communist Party, and the CCP is using high technology to tighten its control on the society. So one lesson we can learn, and many countries have learned, is that for the past 3 decades, many scholars and politicians believe that the kind of market economy and global engagement can push forward China's political democratization, but that didn't happen. So we must be very, very careful about the so-called engagement. And China destroyed the one country, two systems, and China violated its commitment to Tibetans and the WTO. And China manipulated the human rights dialogues between EU and China, between China and the United States. So that's kind of the nature of the CCP. They won't honor their commitment. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I think that's. I think for a long time the Chinese Communist Party has, played the victim as well, and I think it continues to play the victim, as they often portray themselves as the victim of colonizers and the imperialist world, and this is why sometimes they will, whenever anyone raises the argument of or the issue of human rights in China, they will say this is the West, projecting their views and interfering in Chinese national affairs, when it's really a conversation about basic fundamental rights that the citizens themselves within the country and from the occupied lands are asking for. Which I'm happy that you talked about technology, because that was also a question that I wanted to raise. The use of technology has played a crucial role in furthering the repression of all our communities. For example, in East Turkestan and Tibet, the surveillance technology has allowed the creation of the current open air prison system, whether it's the monitoring of dissidents and just of people who are living their daily lives, or in Hong Kong, how authorities are using technology to monitor activists who are also abroad and prohibiting any protests. So how do we connect these issues strategically, and how do we talk about these issues at the same time? Yes, Ingabatu.
Actually, I wanted to just make a comment on the question about the repression, the difference, between the past and today, and also there are some differences. The repression the people of Southern Mongolia, Tibet, and East Turkestan facing, and the people of Chinese people are facing, there is a little bit differences. because for these occupied nations, Southern Mongolia, Tibet, and East Turkestan, the repression we are facing is actually it's pretty much just the CCP's intention to destroy us as a distinct people and a nation. They want to just make us a part of the homogeneous Chinese society, to make us a Chinese. They started, especially since Xi Jinping's power. Now they started advertising the so-called Zhonghua nationality. They're forcefully inculcating this identity to the Mongolians, Tibetans, and Uyghurs. They call this as the second generation ethnic policy. They are saying that Mongolians, Tibetans, Uyghurs do not need to exist as a separate ethnic groups. They are all Chinese. It's clearly that, it's publicly just saying that these people need to be wiped out. So this is the repression. This is the threat that we are facing. However, the Chinese people, yes, they are facing, the human rights abuses, oppression, but they do not worry about the exist as a nation. We do. Our nation is trying to be completely destroyed. Our language, tradition, identities systematically erased. So this is the difference between the repression that we face and the Chinese people face. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is an important point to raise. Julie?
Yeah, so answering the question regarding technology used by the Chinese Communist Party to conduct surveillance against its own people, to conduct surveillance against any dissidents within China or actually beyond the borders of China. I think one of the very big challenges that we are facing currently is that the international community, or actually our friends or our people from different world countries, are not aware of how they have been monitored or controlled by the Chinese Communist Party's red capital, or infiltrate or influenced by these enterprises that are related to the Chinese Communist Party. So for example, we know that one of the very, very popular social media platforms nowadays is actually called TikTok, but then it is not aware or noted by every people using it. That is not known by a lot of people across the globe, that it is actually a company related to the Chinese Communist Party, which has been doing business with the Chinese Communist Party and have been involved in all these human rights abuses across the globe. So I think as activists or advocacy groups, one of the very important things for us is actually to raise awareness and then to expose all these facts to the people who have been making use or have been influenced by all these platforms or actually tools. And then the second one would actually be to push forward legislations that restricts or require transparency from our own companies in our own countries that have been doing businesses or have economic ties with all these state-owned enterprises or state-related enterprises. Because, for example, in Canada, we know that there are a lot of public pension funds in Canada. However, what we see is that a lot of these taxpayers' money have been invested into different companies related to the Chinese Party, including Repression, which is involved in the construction of the surveillance system back in East Turkestan. So another very important thing that we have to push forward together is to push for legislations that restricts our own companies from doing businesses with these companies that have been directly or indirectly involved in the construction of these surveillance systems or have been involved in any forms of human rights abuses in China or beyond the borders of China. So I think these are the two very important points that we can be thinking about and can be pushing forward together.
I think you're absolutely right. I think targeted policies and legislation that holds, companies accountable for complying with the Chinese rule, or even providing some of the tools, like you said, Thermo Fisher or some other US companies who are actively providing the tools for the Chinese government to further repress some of the people. I think that is a strategy that we need to talk about. I think I was also I think one example of previous campaigns that we worked on with Hong Kongers and Tibetans and Uyghurs was the Apple campaign, actually, because as you know, Apple is, of course, one of the, world top companies, and they are very willingly submitting to the Chinese Communist Party because, as you know, they have refused to allow certain VPNs in Hong Kong, for example, or they've removed the VPN apps from their Apple Store in China at the demand of the Chinese Communist Party. And sometimes they even self-censor because they want to basically have access to the Chinese market. So I think, we have come now to the question of what should we expect from companies, multinational companies, foreign companies operating in China? Should they, because they're confronted with, this dilemma of should we, operate in China, have access to the Chinese market, but then be, I guess, compliant or just at the orders, respond to the orders of the Chinese Communist Party. I think we need to really hold these brands or companies accountable for this, because it's not because they're operating in China that they should overlook human rights issues. And I think as consumers, or even affected communities, we need to have these conversations more often, I would say. And I think targeted sanctions or even legislation, as you've said, I think they're necessary as well. I don't know if any of the speakers had any points to raise on regarding the question of technology. Yes, Ishaq.
Yes, I give two small example what we can do. One is when I get my vaccination for COVID-19, and after the vaccination, before I leave, they gave me a mask. And then I was looking at the mask, it was made in China. And immediately I pulled my cell phone and pull up the article about the forced labor on the Uyghur. And I went to the front desk and I told them, this mask I cannot use. I am a Uyghur and it was made from the Uyghur forced labor. So you shouldn't do that. And then I gave him the article, and then also, and she was very embarrassed, the front desk, and she was apologizing and say, oh, sorry, we should know that, we will. I mean, at least we can do something like that immediately with your ability in your area. And another one example, my company is a big company, international, and they also give us free mask. It's the same. And then I ordered it because I have to back to the office. So I ordered it. When the mask came to me, I found out it was made in China again. So I wrote an email to the company CEO and I told him, I am a Uyghur. I was working for this company for almost like 14 years. And then now I found out my company, I'm so proud of using the mask, which is made in the China using Uyghur forced labor. And I told my sister's story and the New Yorker's article. I forwarded everything. And the second day, CEO replied to me, sorry, Elshad, we are proud of you. You are our employee. We should be very careful. And in the coming, we will be very, very careful. We never do anything with the genocide. And CEO replied, emphasizing, I am the board member of the US Holocaust Museum, so I will do my best to advocate for the Uyghur. I mean, this is very simple. We shouldn't be hesitate. When you are surrounding, when you have any chance, we just tell the story and push it. Don't hesitate. Don't think, oh, this is not a proper time. Any time is a proper time for us because it is related to the human dignity. It is everyone's dignity. Thank you. Yeah.
I think that touches on, I was talking about this yesterday, how we should, as I think, alliance with, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, and everyone who is oppressed under this regime, we should be thinking about, I think, collective action, like a little bit of like the Palestinian BDS movement, boycott, divest, and sanction. I think when we're talking about forced labor and all of the economic influence that China has today, we should be thinking about pushing for example, I think Joey, you've mentioned pension funds. We should be pushing for pension funds to divest from China and the Chinese market, and boycott Chinese products that are made of forced labor, or any products that are made by forced labor, and also sanction those who are responsible. I think these are lessons or things that we could learn from other movements as well. So I think we also have to engage in these conversations as well. We have a question from the audience, from Ken, who asked actually, who is from Japan, and is asking, the CCP and the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, will have second Beijing Olympic Games next year again. Could you discuss about that? How do you evaluate the protest movement so far? This is an interesting question, as I know that many of us here have been involved in the No Beijing 2022 campaign, and we've been campaigning and for the past year about not hosting the games in Beijing again. So happy to hear some thoughts. I know Teng Biao, I'm sure you have some.
Yeah, thank you. So we have talked to IOC officials directly, and we raised the issues of human rights violations, especially the Uyghur genocide and the Hong Kong situation. And we also organized the campaigns to press the Olympic sponsors, the companies sponsoring Beijing Winter Olympics, like Airbnb and many others, we told them it's not appropriate to support the genocide Olympics. So far the campaigns, me and many other organizations, Tibetan organizations and Uyghur organizations, and many of us have participated in, were kind of powerful, many. Some people may not agree with a full boycott. That is our position, but it's also great to kind of financially or diplomatically boycott Beijing Winter Olympics. Yeah.
Thank you, Teng Biao. Yeah, I think also I think last week, 2 weeks ago, we had the Global Day of Action, which actually happened in over 60 cities around the world, 25 different countries. All of us coming together for this one common goal of boycotting Beijing 2022, a full boycott. We're talking about athlete boycott, diplomatic boycott, the whole package, because we believe that in the context of a genocide, ongoing genocide, there should be no room left for a repressive authoritarian country to utilize a sporting event, basically sport wash, because Olympic Games, it's an international event, a sporting event that a lot of countries, especially authoritarian countries, they use as a way to legitimize their own brutal regime. So in that context, we believe that there shouldn't be any space for them to host these games until they don't restore human rights and fundamental freedoms. So we have been working on this for the past year, and we will continue working on this for the remaining 7 months up until the games. And who knows what happens, in the next years in the future, if they will be again granted any other opportunity, because of course, as we have discovered, the International Olympic Committee only cares about money. So we are expecting them to give again some other games to China. So we will be there when it happens to really push against it. We have another question from the audience, Garrett, who's asking about ASEAN has been under pressure from China, especially Myanmar. How do we deal with this better? I think this is more, in the context where China has accumulated a lot of political and economic power and is really threatening and intimidating countries, and to have them to also have allies with, create or form alliances with other authoritarian countries, as we know, like, for example, some Muslim majority countries or some Asian countries that support China, because, for example, at the UN, which is, I think, the best example of China's influence in our international system, where they're creating that alliance of states who are also authoritarian states to challenge the human rights and democratic values that we know in our international human rights system. So in that context, how do we, I guess, counter the Chinese influence globally? Any of our speakers would like to?
I guess let me give a little bit my perspective. China is a destabilizing power now become in the world, not only in the Asia. Myanmar is the first test of the Xi Jinping's power in Asia, and they are undermining all the democracy values. And it was set up when the United Nations set up, and in the United Nations chapter, it has the human rights as a value democracy. But now China is infiltrating all the international organization and undermining the international order, and which was based on the democracy, human rights, rule of law. But China in the two fronts, one is in Southeast Asia. The Myanmar, as I said, is the first test of their power to undermine a democracy and to benefit from the destabilizing of the government. And then another way is from the One Road, One Belt in Asia, especially in Central Asia, and they're infiltrating Pakistan and also Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, until the East Europe. So it is dangerous. It is similar to the, I'm a amateur historian. I like to compare the history, and it is similar to the Second World War before, like Japan, Nazi, and fascist Italy, they will come together. And they also had some East European ally, and also in Asia, in other places, they had some ally. So we do this and expose what the Chinese want. And also we need Myanmar people come together with us. Like today's meeting, we also should next time invite Myanmars and Vietnamese, and if possible, the North Koreans and Malaysians, Indonesians, all is under, and even the Philippines, because they are all under the Chinese direct threat. If now is Myanmar, second, we don't know if it's possible Thailand or Malaysia or the Vietnam. They are all under the Chinese power and their threat. So this is the global issue. And we are the people under the threat, and we have experienced this brutal lie of the communist 100 years. So we as a sufferer, and we as know this reality, the truth, we need to expose it. Come together not only Uyghur or Tibetan or Mongolian or Hong Kong or Taiwanese now is under this oppression. All the people under the threat, we need to come together. This is the only solution, just like defeating the Nazi. If the Nazi was defeated in the first when it invaded the Czech Sutherland, and then if it was stopped in the Poland, probably next Second World War we can avoid. But no, international world allowed it. So then we had that disaster in the. Now, as I said in the opening remark, if we are not stopping Chinese now, this communist government, we will have doomsday very soon. It is in front of us. We're already in half of the doomsday. We are all confined to our home because of this Chinese virus, this COVID-19. So we need to wake up to call up the world. Thank you.
Yes, I think someone earlier mentioned, raised the question of, the Belt and Road Initiative. And I think having, all the people who are I think all the nations or countries who are involved in the Belt and Road Initiative, we should be talking about that more widely because it is the direct Chinese influence. And it is, I think, it's a conversation about neocolonialism as well and economic colonialism. This is an interesting point. I'm sure that in the near future we can have more conversations with a wider group of people who are whether they're Burmese or Rohingyas and others who are also witnessing the direct threat from the Chinese Communist Party as well. I think it will give, I'm sure, floor for very interesting debates and conversations. We are now approaching the end of our webinar. I will now just ask if any of our speakers have last comments they would like to raise or share with us.
Hello, Ms.
Yes.
Arkin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really, it's really interesting that we have a lot of discussions on today's topic, I would say. So I'm in complete agreement with all the speakers. Like we are doing a lot of activism or joining hands with each other and coordinating with, and we are like Mr. Ishan said, like we need to coordinate with not only our people like Uyghur, Southern Mongolian, Taiwanese, and Hong Kongers. We need to also incorporate other people who are directly affected by the Chinese kind of aggression. So this is one important thing that we should keep in mind in our future endeavors. And second, I think we need to have a strategy to reach out to the Chinese people inside China. The Communist Party of China, a handful of people, I would say, is holding the Chinese people hostage. The important thing is that we need to kind of awaken or kind of enlighten, reach out to the common Chinese people inside China. Is there a way we can do that, The real answer, I would say, is we are going to find that from within China, and it is a difficult thing, it's a very challenging thing, but we need to have this thing in our mind, like to reach out to the Chinese people in whatever way we can to educate them, to enlighten them, because basically what the Communist Party of China is doing is they are keeping the majority, I would say 99% of people hostage without letting them know what is the real thing, They are always kept under propaganda of the Communist Party of China. So this is one important thing I would like to add here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zheng. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. Oh, Tan Biao, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, very briefly, a couple of points. First, there are many different ways that we can do to counter the Chinese government's negative influence globally. And one thing is like we can push the Western countries to shut down Confucius Institute. For the past years, many Confucius Institute have been closed, and there are many different associations, organizations under the umbrella of UFW, the United Front Work Department, like Chamber of Commerce, the Students and Scholars Associations, and Thompson associations, and at least we can raise the awareness of these influence of operations. And second thing is we should lobby free countries to pass the legislation of kind of a Magnitsky Act and to sanction the perpetrators and the human rights violators is really powerful, and we can expose their individual information of those human rights abusers. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you, Tamia. Julie?
Yeah, again, I would just like to say that as the Chinese Communist Party continues to extend its long arms to oppress the people within the Chinese borders or even beyond the Chinese borders, I think it is really important that we, the people from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, East Turkestan, Tibet, and also Southern Mongolia, to unite together to become a one stronger force to stand up against the Chinese Communist Party. And also, as we always say that injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere, it is also very crucial that we also unite and connect to the other people also under oppression of any tyrannies across the globe. So I would really appreciate any kinds of alliance solidarity construction between our people and also with the people of Myanmar, of the people of Belarus, and also of the other people who are also under oppressions of tyrannies. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to participate in the panel today, and I look forward to our further discussions on how we can move forward more effectively and stronger to stand up against the tyrannies.
Thank you, Julie. Engabatu? Yeah.
Yes, just a very quick comment. Chinese problem is no longer is a problem of just colonization, occupation of East Turkestan, Tibet, and Southern Mongolia. It is a global problem. We have to realize that this is, no longer just a regional problem. It's a global problem. So the lesson learned is that do not trust the Chinese government. Do not take what the Chinese government says at its face value. When they came to our land, they said they liberate, develop, and then now they are doing exact same thing to the other countries like Belt and Road Initiative countries. So the lesson is do not trust what they say and then take action now before too late. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think this is something that we can take away from this panel, is that we have to come together, not only our affected communities, but beyond China, all of the communities that are feeling this threat and intimidation by the Chinese Communist Party. And I think it really wraps up our webinar today in a really brilliant way. And I hope, as Joey said, we will be having these conversations with other wider groups as well, for example, thinking about Milk Tea Alliance and others who are working to achieve democracy and human rights in other authoritarian countries as well. So once again, I would like to thank all of you today for joining this panel and expressing your solidarity. I think this is really important that we come together in these really hard and dark times. So again, very appreciative of your time and efforts working to achieve human rights and democracy. Just a quick announcement that we are also, our second panel has already started, which is with policymakers. So we have members of the European Parliament and other national parliaments who have also begun a webinar talking about the CCP influence as well. If you'd like to join, my colleague Kuhn is also moderating that panel. I've sent the link in the chat box. So once again, thanks everyone, and I really look forward to working with you in the near future and continuing this conversation I think really thinking about meaningful and concrete actions as well in the future. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone again for joining.
Thank you.